Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Here we are with another episode of The Shift with Gina. Very happy to be here with you all. I feel like it's been a while. I think maybe because the last couple of weeks I haven't gotten out as much content as I normally do. My daughter's been a little bit under the weather, which of course means I am a little bit under the weather. I'm better now, but it's kind of impossible as a mom of little ones to not get a little something of what they have because they just constantly wipe their snotty nose all over you. And, they get so clingy when they're sick, and it's kind of cute. It's kind of sweet because I know it's not going to last forever. Soon, before I know it, she's going to be like, 13 years old and be like, leave me alone, mom, I'm fine. So I will take all of the snotty kisses and hugs as much as I can. But here we are, we're back. We're doing the sort of all-in extreme potty training with my daughter over the next couple of days. She's at that age now where she has gone to the bathroom in the potty and she knows that is supposed to happen, but she just doesn't really want to do it yet. So we're doing those couple of days where she runs around the house just naked from the waist down, and we just try to catch her peeing or pooping and then put her on the potty. It's very tedious and time consuming, but apparently it's the way. It's the way to do it that just kind of expedites the process. I really don't want to have two kids in diapers. I'm hoping that we can get her potty trained before the next baby arrives in a couple months. So we'll see. Who knows? Sometimes we put these milestones on kids and they just do their thing whenever they're ready, and we can't really do anything about it. So that's what's happening with me. That's the exciting news in my life. We're going to talk today about the Alabama ruling on IVF, in vitro fertilization. This has been breaking news all over the country for the last week or so. Everyone's talking about IVF, and of course it has sparked big conversations and debates about IVF in general, the immorality of IVF, whether we should be supporting IVF, especially as people who are, quote, pro-life Christian conservatives. So we're going to talk about that ruling today, and we're going to get into what IVF is and why so many of us oppose IVF, and the morality of it and what connects it so strongly to things like surrogacy and abortion. But before we get into that, we have a great new sponsor I want to tell you guys about that's very much related to all of the stories that I tell you on this podcast. Upward News is a really fantastic newsletter that comes into your inbox every week, and it gives you all of the news and insights that you're not going to find in mainstream media. And the great thing about Upward News is that it's short, it's to the point, and it's going to give you a lot of the information and details that are usually withheld from you when it comes to the other major news outlets. I find that a lot of news today is very outrage focused, and it can be very sensationalist. I like Upward News a lot because it comes into your inbox. It just gives you the facts. It gives you the unbiased information, and you can collect what you need from it, and you can move on. You can still stay up to date with what's happening politically without feeling like you're too overwhelmed. I want to show you really quick what the inbox looks like. Okay, so this is what an Upward News email looks like. Okay, so this one was from yesterday, and it's going to give you just the headlines, right? So the first thing coming from Washington is Biden's confusing liquefied natural gas policy. So I like the headlines or the subheads here. What's happening, the context, motives, and then it tells you the inconsistent policy, geopolitical consequences, and why it matters. So you've got a short, really nice summary of that headline. And then it goes down to talk more about Biden winning the Michigan primary. And then this is a story that I think has been you have some outlets that are talking about this, but this story of the 22-year-old UGA student, Laken Riley, who was murdered by an illegal migrant. This little summary here from Upward News gives you all of the main details you need to know without, diving into anything unnecessary. What happened, how the murderer got to the U.S., his criminal record, the gruesome details, why the story matters, even tells you the pattern. In the last 2 months alone, illegal migrants across the country have been charged in connection with beating of police officers, rape of a 14-year-old girl, shooting an injured woman that injured her, stabbing death of another migrant, hit and run death of a 10-year-old, and murder of a 2-year-old. Gives you all this really useful information in a quick amount of time. So for those of us who are busy and don't want to pour through the headlines and the news and all that, Upward News is really great. It's free. You can sign up to get this newsletter for free. There is, of course, a premium version that's going to give you even more stories, some more headline news if you're interested in that. But if you want to just sign up for a free newsletter that gives you the latest headlines, click the link in the description, or you just go to join.upward.news and you can do /Gina. And that's going to give you my affiliate link, and you can sign up. And like I said, the newsletter is free. So that is what brings us to today's story, because I was just updating myself on this IVF ruling in Alabama through Upward News. So you probably heard by now, the Alabama Supreme Court has made a ruling that is set to redefine the legal standing of frozen embryos within the state. Okay, so just a little recap for those of you, I'm sure you all know what IVF is. They take a woman's egg, they take the man's sperm, and they create an embryo in a lab, which is a human. And they freeze these embryos. And whenever the couple is ready, or the woman is ready wants to give birth and get pregnant, they implant the embryos into the woman. This is the IVF process. So by decreeing that frozen embryos can be legally recognized as children under state law, the court has sparked a contentious debate on the future of fertility treatments in Alabama. So the Alabama Supreme Court has ruled that frozen embryos are humans. They are human children. This is a fantastic ruling because that's exactly what these frozen embryos are. This ruling emerged from multiple wrongful death lawsuits initiated by 3 couples whose frozen embryos, whose children, were inadvertently destroyed in a fertility clinic accident. Now, the word destroyed is a very sterile, sanitized way to say that their children were killed. This is essentially abortion. The court, leveraging anti-abortion rhetoric enshrined in the Alabama Constitution, right? So that's how this is framed. The court has been leveraging anti-abortion rhetoric, which I'm not mad about. Let's leverage all of the anti-abortion rhetoric that we possibly can. I'm totally on board with that. The court concluded that a law from 1872, which permits parents to sue for the wrongful death of a minor child, is applicable to all unborn children without discrimination based on their developmental stage or physical location. Love that. Love that. That's essentially the foundation of what we believe in terms of abortion. A human life has a right to life, regardless of the human life's stage of development or the human life's location. That includes a frozen embryo. Justice J. Mitchell, writing for the majority of the all-Republican court, articulated that the term unborn children encompasses children in their entirety, dismissing any distinctions that might arise from their stage of development, physical location, or other secondary traits. This interpretation builds upon previous rulings that recognized fetuses as covered under Alabama's Wrongful Death of a Minor Act, explicitly extending this protection to extrauterine children. So the implications of this ruling for the realm of fertility treatments are supposedly profound and immediate, and everyone's freaking out about it. Okay, because historically, the legal system has categorized frozen embryos as property. However, this new classification as persons challenges the foundational practices of IVF. Now, you have a lot of people who are coming forward, like this woman, the CEO of a national infertility association, expresses grave concerns over this ruling, calls this a terrifying development, says this raises existential questions for both fertility providers and patients. Yes, as it should. So now there's a lot of uncertainty surrounding the ability to freeze, donate, or destroy unused embryos. And this has introduced a significant degree of apprehension among those relying on IVF for family building. Okay. So in my mind and a lot of people's minds who oppose IVF, and especially the way that IVF discards of and kills human children, this is all good stuff so far. This ruling not only redefines the legal status of frozen embryos, but also reflects the broader national debate that we have about IVF and so-called reproductive rights and the sanctity of life. When does human life begin? When is human life sacred? When does human life get the right to life? So people are freaking out, especially doctors and other actors in the conventional medical system based in Alabama. And this recent court decision has triggered concerns among doctors. And there are some people afraid that this could dissuade doctors from moving to or remaining in the state of Alabama. because they're considering legal risks. They are nervous that participating in fertility treatments and IVF in the state of Alabama is eventually going to result in some kind of criminal proceeding, because if they, destroy the frozen embryos, whether by accident or whether on purpose, they could be held criminally responsible. And so, they think this is a bad thing. They're saying that this is going to negatively affect the way that doctors approach IVF treatments and approach fertility treatments in the state of Alabama, which it will. But they're just scared that, the doctors are going to get sent to jail if they destroy frozen embryos, which I don't know how Alabama is going to go forward with this ruling, what it's actually going to mean in practice. But this is raising a lot of questions and conversations about IVF. This is a topic that many people are divided over, especially within the right and within pro-life / anti-abortion groups. So we know how leftists and feminists feel about IVF, right? Because we know that these leftists and feminists, they do not have they don't hold the same sacredness and sanctity of life the way that we do. So of course they're going to support all forms of IVF without any restrictions, because for them, it's all about the adults, the parents, the mothers having a sort of right to a child, which we're going to get into later. It doesn't really exist, but it doesn't matter how they go about that. That's what they want. Now, within the right, there is a lot of disagreement about IVF. There are a lot of people who cannot understand why anyone would be opposed to IVF, especially those of us who want to increase the birth rate, those of us who want to see the family unit strengthened in America. They look at us and they're like, well, I thought you wanted more families in America. I thought you wanted more babies to be born. So how could you possibly oppose IVF and the process of IVF? They think it's some kind of gotcha. I thought you supported families and you wanted to see more children born. Yes, we do. But let me explain to you why we oppose IVF at its core. And it has nothing to do with depriving people of having children. We oppose IVF and surrogacy and abortion all for the same reason. Because at their core, these things treat human life as if it is a commodity or a product to be created, sold, bought, and even discarded of without recognizing or honoring the sanctity of life and a human's right to life regardless of their stage of development or their location. Is there a way to approach IVF that doesn't discard of human life? Yes, there is. There is a way, but that way would require much more regulation than what we have now, which is what we're starting to see in Alabama. So there is a way to approach IVF that does not discard of human life. But even if there was, I personally oppose IVF. We're going to get into that a little bit later. But this is why all of these things, abortion, surrogacy, and IVF, they are all related at their core. And I know this is difficult to stomach because people, they hear the word abortion and they hear IVF and they're like, they're not at all related. IVF is about creating life. Abortion is about ending life. That is true, but at its core, it's about creating and buying and selling and discarding of human life because it treats human life as a commodity and a product rather than a sacred gift that is presented to us by God through the conjugal act of marriage. And with IVF, I don't think people realize, they think most people, when they hear of IVF, they imagine a couple struggling with infertility that wants to have a baby. So they go to the doctor and they get all the things done and boom, they're with child. Most people don't realize that a lot of these babies, these frozen embryos, get discarded because the thing about IVF is when you go through the process, they have to create multiple embryos to give you a higher likelihood of it working. Because a lot of times what happens is a woman will go through IVF and they will implant an embryo in her body. And because this is inherently an unnatural way to get pregnant and have children, a lot of times the body will reject the embryo and it will result in a miscarriage. I know multiple people, I can probably name 6 or 7 people off the top of my head that I know personally who have had miscarriages via IVF because it's a more difficult process for the body. So because of this high likelihood of miscarriage or it's just not taking, the body's just not taking it, they have to create multiple embryos to have them in the freezer so that the woman can have multiple chances at this embryo surviving. And a lot of times what also happens is they'll implant 2 or even 3 embryos in the woman's body, because a lot of times one of them will not make it. So for example, I have a family member had 3 embryos implanted in her. One of them died, did not make it, and she ended up having twins. So this is why they have multiple embryos, because there is a much higher likelihood of there being a miscarriage and the child not making it. So IVF, as we know it today in the conventional medical system, it is inseparable from the idea that you have to end human life in order for this process to work. It's rare, it's not impossible, but it's rare to see couples who go through IVF and don't end up discarding embryos. Recent data shows that there are more than 1 million frozen embryos around the country right now. By now, judging by when that recent data was taken, there are certainly more than that. You have more than 1 million children in the stage of frozen embryos who were sitting in the freezer. And considering how much more common IVF has become, that number is definitely bigger. Even the term frozen embryo is dehumanizing and reductive and cold, and it doesn't even begin to scratch at the surface of the sanctity of life, because that's a human with unique DNA. You know the gender. That's a human baby in a certain stage of development. So when you see these like YouTubers who are all about IVF and like, we're going to chart our IVF journey, they get online and they joke about their kids having barcodes. They know they have 3 daughters and 4 sons in the freezer. So they joke about, oh, this one, maybe I want 2 boys. Maybe I want a boy and a girl. It's like shopping for a designer pet. And that is one of the reasons why IVF is so, it gives people the ick, because it is such a departure from the natural, intentional way that God created us to have children. So the term frozen embryo, again, it's very reductive. It does not begin to honor the sanctity and sacredness of human life, because that embryo is a child with unique DNA. I personally know a couple people who had children via IVF. And every person I know who has children via IVF, they still have babies in the freezer. I know how much they pay for storage each year. They tell me that they likely won't have these babies because they can't afford to right now, or they just don't want to because they're getting a little bit older and they're realizing that it's hard enough to have 1 or 2 babies. I don't want to have another, because it's really, they're playing the science game. They're playing God, where they choose, okay, maybe let's have this child. Should I take this one out of the freezer? Should I not? And here's the thing about IVF is that most women who do IVF, they do it at a certain age because they're struggling with infertility, right? So by the time IVF works, right, they start doing IVF at like 34. And then by the time it works, they get pregnant when they're 36. They have their first baby when they're 37. And they have 3 other babies that are sitting in the freezer, right? So by the time you have a baby at 37, then you turn 39 and you feel like, okay, maybe I'm ready to have another one. But you're 39 and you're like, oh, I'm just too tired. I'm just a little bit too old. And as a woman gets older, of course, the chances of that embryo surviving and that embryo being born, those chances get a little slimmer as the woman gets older. So most of these women are already doing IVF when they're in their mid to late 30s, and they're creating multiple embryos to sit in the freezer because they want to have a high chance of having a child or children. So that's why they end up with multiple frozen embryos sitting there in storage. Like I said, I know a family member, 2 family members, I know friends, people, acquaintances who have babies in the freezer, and I would say that almost all of them plan on not giving birth to those children. I don't know what they plan to do. There are options now. Those babies can be sold, which is so disgusting to me. You're going to sell your children. That's human trafficking. Sell your children either to couples who are struggling with infertility, or that baby will just go into the industry of surrogacy, or they'll end up selling the baby to the medical system for human testing, or that baby will be destroyed, killed, an abortion essentially. So this is the process of IVF is resulting in hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of human embryos, of human life being discarded of and being destroyed, essentially abortions. So here's the thing, even if IVF is heavily regulated, I and many other Christians still oppose the process of IVF itself. And I know this is a difficult conversation. This conversation is not meant, I can't believe I have to say this, but I have to say it because I know that it's a sensitive topic. This conversation is not meant to be an attack on anyone who is wrestling with infertility. My heart breaks for women who are struggling to get pregnant. I really do pray for women who are struggling with infertility because it is a heart-wrenching thing to experience. So this conversation is not meant to be an attack on women who are struggling with infertility. This is a conversation that needs to be talked about because it really comes down to the fabric of our society, the building block of our society, which is the family. We oppose IVF because it is a crass, inhumane act that breaks up the very building block of our society, which is the family. It separates the sacred conjugal act of reproduction, which has specific meaning and purpose, and it replaces it with a sterile science experiment in which life is created in a lab like a product. God created marriage and pregnancy very intentionally, and this is something that most of us really come to realize as we grow older and have families of our own. God intentionally made sex within marriage to result in children. And I know saying this now is so controversial. You get called prude, you get called a fundamentalist, but the fact of the matter is God did this very intentionally. It's not an accident. It was not an accident the way that God created marriage and sex and reproduction and children. It's all with a very specific higher purpose and design. The other day, my husband was stroking my belly and, feeling the baby kick. I'm in third trimester now, so I've got plenty of belly. I'm getting there. And we were talking about how fascinating it is that there is this human inside of me kicking and growing and taking up space in my body. The other day, the baby was just kicking like at like 6 a.m, like doing leg exercises in there. And it is such a magical, miraculous thing. And this magical, miraculous thing is inseparable from the act that brought us to this point. It's just, they are inseparable. And I know that science and modern society wants to separate the two. And I believe, and it's the church's ruling on this too, is that it's not moral to separate the two. God created this process for a reason. Things like IVF are in direct opposition to what God created for us. They're in direct opposition to this beautiful and intentional process that God gave to a husband and a wife. It is a gift to a husband and a wife to bring a child into the world in the natural way that he intended. And, you hear that phrase, just because we can doesn't mean we should. It's a very sort of like simplistic, reductive way to approach modern society and science. But it's true. Just because we can doesn't mean we should. Just because we can create embryos in a little petri dish, like they're a product, like it's a little toy or a designer pet, doesn't mean that we should. And I know, again, this conversation is very difficult for people who are struggling with infertility. And there are a lot of couples out there, maybe some of you who are listening, who have conceived children through IVF, and you have a very happy, loving family. But the problem is that when we approach this conversation, too many people are holding on tightly to the pain of people struggling with infertility. And they hold on to that pain and they approach the entire conversation from the pain of infertility. And this is difficult to accept. Nobody has a right to a child or a right to conceive a child by any means necessary. And that's because nobody has a right to a human. And again, this conversation is not meant to be an attack on anyone who is struggling with infertility, but the fact of the matter is we can't budge on this. Nobody has a right to a human. So whenever we talk about IVF and a lot of the ways that we oppose IVF, there is inevitably somebody in the comment section who's like, well, you think that women just don't deserve to have children if they're infertile? It's not about someone deserving. It's not about someone having a right to children, because you don't have a right to any human. Because humans have inherent rights themselves. So this is essentially the foundation of slavery. You don't have a right to any human, whether it's a child that you want to create in a petri dish or a human that you want to own for labor. And this is a really difficult thing to accept in our modern society because we have been taught that everything that we want, we have a right to, even if that means having children in any way necessary. And we have to start teaching each other and teaching the younger generation that nobody has a right to humans. Even parents who desperately want to become parents, even couples who desperately want to become parents, we do not have a right to humans because these children that we become pregnant with and these children that are created through the act that is meant to be done within the context of marriage, these children are a gift from God. They are a blessing. They are not something that we create in a lab. They are sacred, precious human life that God has gifted to us. And it is not acceptable to reduce these children to frozen embryos that are stashed in some cold little freezer in some medical system. We need to acknowledge that IVF is only becoming so popular because fertility rates are significantly declining. So instead of taking this very sterile technological route, we need to ask ourselves, why is it that so many couples can't get pregnant? This is the problem. Whenever we talk about IVF, lawmakers and political pundits and podcasters, they're like, well, we're here because the rates of fertility are declining. Yes, that's true. But why aren't we trying to address the declining fertility rates? There was, who was it? Carrie Lake the other day or last week. She tweeted that she is supportive of helping women have babies because she wants to see more families. So she's going to support IVF any way she wants. If you want more children to be born, if you want more women to have babies, we need to start talking about why so many women are infertile. Why aren't we addressing the root cause? Instead of just supporting this crass science experiment that's coming out of the conventional medical system that earns the medical system hundreds and thousands of dollars, why aren't we talking about ways that we can improve fertility, improve women's health in this country? I am absolutely in support of more families having children the natural way. And we need to be helping women with their fertility, and that's not by supporting the conventional medical system making millions and millions of dollars. By the way, do you know what the medical definition of infertility is? Anybody? The official definition of infertility in the medical community. Do you know what it is? It's nothing more than this. A couple that has been trying to get pregnant for 1 year and has been unsuccessful. That is the medical official definition of infertility. That's it. That's the definition. So there are millions of women out there who have been told that they are infertile. They have been diagnosed as infertile just because they haven't gotten pregnant after a year. No tests run, no investigation. Even if nobody has ever helped them improve their fertility, which is absolutely possible. So many women are tricked into believing that their fertility can't be improved, but it can. And yet they try for 12 months, they don't have a baby, and boom, the medical system diagnoses them as infertile. That's crazy. That's crazy. Insane. That actually makes my blood boil. You got a lot of women who are struggling to get pregnant and they go to the doctor. They don't, no questions asked. What's your lifestyle like? What's your diet like? What kind of medication are you on? What kind of medication have you taken in the past? Were you on birth control for an extended period of time in the past? No questions. You tried for a year? Oh, I'm so sorry you didn't get pregnant. You're infertile. That is the medical diagnosis. It makes me crazy, guys. Can you believe that is the medical definition of infertility? So we are approaching this completely the wrong way. Of course, I want more women to have children. Of course, I want more families to grow and have more children. That's why we have to start by looking at why so many women are infertile in this country, are diagnosed infertile. Because I know more couples who have been diagnosed as infertile and have gone on to have healthy children than I know couples who have been diagnosed as infertile and have never had children. That's because when the medical system diagnoses you as infertile, they don't help you find a way to improve your fertility or improve your health. What they do is they tell you you're infertile. Why? So that they can push you into IVF, push you into surrogacy, push you into all of these other things in the conventional medical system that make them millions and millions of dollars. It's very convenient for them, isn't it? Because what doesn't make them any money, what doesn't make Big Pharma any money, is if you go back home and if you find holistic ways to improve your fertility. But it even starts earlier than that. We do not teach the young women in our society to prepare their health and prepare their fertility from a young age. In fact, we do quite the opposite. Everything we teach the younger generation from their teen years actually strips them of healthy fertility in their future. Doctors are giving the birth control pill to teenagers, 14, 15 years old. So they're on the pill for 10, 15 years. And then they get off the pill and they're struggling to ovulate because your body has not ovulated for the last 15 years. And this is especially dangerous when you give the pill to girls whose reproductive systems and whose hormonal cycles have not fully developed. They get their first period, they go through 3 cycles, it's a little bit heavy, irregular, they go to the doctor and they complain of some pain. Take the pill, honey. They end up taking the pill for 15 years and then they wonder why they can't get pregnant. And then at the same time with teens, we encourage them to slather all kinds of endocrine disrupting products on their skin from a young age, eat all kinds of toxic foods, drink toxic water, fill them up with tap water. And all of these lifestyle choices and dietary choices that start to eat away at your fertility from a young age. So we're setting up young women for failure. So then they get to their late 20s, early 30s, and they realize it's actually not that easy to get pregnant because they've been bombarding their body with so many endocrine disrupting toxins over the last 15 to 20 years. It's no wonder you have so many women who are struggling to get pregnant. And then on top of that, we don't teach any young women how to understand their hormonal cycle, how to approach their menstrual cycle, how to know if they're ovulating, when they're ovulating, what their period is, how their period is related to their ovulation. You have a lot of girls who just don't have a period for like 6 years. And they're like, and then they try to get pregnant. They're like, why can't I get pregnant? Yeah, because you only have a period if you ovulate. So if you're not having a period, if your period disappears for whatever reason for a couple of years, that means you are not ovulating. A period only comes to women after they ovulate. It's not the other way around. This is why ovulation is really it's the main event of your menstrual cycle. Ovulation is where it all happens. Ovulation is the only thing that precedes your period. Ovulation results in massively positive hormonal changes in your body. The rise of estrogen right before you ovulate, the rise of progesterone after you ovulate. These are very important hormones that have rises and falls for specific reasons throughout your menstrual cycle, and it all comes from ovulation. Then you only have a period if you ovulate. And having a period is an important thing. It's an important part of a healthy cycle for women in their childbearing years. So we don't teach women about their cycle. We don't tell them how to understand ovulation. We just either shove pharmaceuticals at them or we just let them figure it out. And then on top of that, when women reach their late 20s or early 30s and they try to get pregnant because they got married and they're not successfully getting pregnant, we don't offer them real solutions. We just tell them to go get IVF. Go spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, even if it's with your insurance company, and go create a baby in a lab because that's the way to do it. You can improve your fertility, ladies. You can. Even at 35 years old. Yes, you can. Trust me, I've seen so many women do it. Women that I know personally and a lot of women that I see online who share their testimonies. It is such a black pill what they do to women in the conventional medical system. I'm not saying that all doctors are evil. I'm not saying that all doctors are bad. I know plenty of great doctors out there, even great OBs that are really there to help women and really want to support women in their health and in their fertility. But the problem is they're so few and far between now. And I think it's up to us. What's the answer here? It starts with a lot of education. It starts with a lot of information that we hand down to young women, to women of all ages in their childbearing years. If you want to have a child sometime in the future, it's never too early to start preparing your body. Start taking prenatals. You know what? I'm going to put the prenatal vitamins that I take in the link in the description here. Even if you're 20 years old and you know you want to have a child in the next 5 to 10 years, start taking prenatal multivitamins. Because if you're pregnant, you found out you're pregnant, it's like too late to try to pump your body full of folate. You're already deficient in folate. You're not going to like suddenly become sufficient in folate by taking prenatal vitamins when you're pregnant. Like, start now. It's important to prepare your body with the nutrients, with the minerals. Prenatal vitamins actually should be taken throughout your childbearing years, regardless of your plans for pregnancy, because it's really all those nutrients and minerals are great for women in their childbearing years. Start preparing now. It's never too early to start preparing for pregnancy. And if you're in your 30s and you're struggling to get pregnant, there's so many things you can do. Obviously, clean up your diet and your lifestyle, but non-toxic living. I don't think women realize how many endocrine disrupting chemicals we consume and slather on our bodies every single day, even down to what kind of plates we eat our food off of. You know, switch to glassware. Stop eating out of plastic, drinking out of plastic. Don't use plastic Tupperware. Even the ceramic mugs that you drink your coffee and your tea out of every day, lead poisoning. Okay, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but seriously, it's a fairly high exposure to lead. And if you're drinking hot liquids out of that every single day, switch to glass. I have glass mugs that I've been trying to drink out of more often lately. There are a lot of ways, and there are a lot of holistic practitioners out there who are dedicated to helping women improve their fertility. If you want to hear more, I am doing, this is my second interview with this OBGYN. She's a holistic OBGYN who opposes abortion, and she's going to come on my show, not my show. She's going to come into my exclusive women's group and talk to us about this IVF ruling. We're going to talk about IVF. We're going to talk about fertility. We're going to talk about the birth control pill. We're even going to talk about perimenopausal and postmenopausal periods in women's lives. And these are the kind of interviews I do in my women's health group, because I want to give you so much of the information and education that I wish I had when I was younger, because there's not much out there for women. So if you want to join the Shift, my women's group, click the link in my description. Enrollment is open for the next week. We don't keep it open. So we only open enrollment once a month to make sure we get all the women in, we get them onboarded. I get to, reach out to you and get in touch with you and make sure your needs are met. We do weekly workouts. We post weekly recipes. We're always doing a nutrition or fitness challenge. This month, we're doing a fitness challenge for healthy shoulders. We're going to do a passive hanging challenge. We just finished a high protein breakfast challenge. So you've got 28 new high protein breakfast recipes to try out. We're constantly doing interviews with experts. Like I said, we have the holistic OBGYN coming next week. And then we have a holistic nutritionist coming the week after. And there are tons of past interviews and webinars and live streams that we've done that's available for you to watch retroactively, wrong word. And I just did a webinar on how to track your ovulation, how to track your menstrual cycle to know when you're ovulating, when you're fertile. There is a fertile window. And I teach you how to understand when that fertile window is, so you don't have to rely on pharmaceuticals, and you don't have to just rely on cross your fingers, hope I don't get pregnant if you're not ready to get pregnant yet. So we do a lot of stuff in my women's group. It's called The Shift. It's hosted on Mighty Networks. You don't need any social media to sign up for it. You just need an email. So link in the description, because I'm really a firm believer in helping women find ways to improve their health, because you don't need to rely on IVF to have children. Again, my heart breaks for women who are struggling with infertility. And I think that we should be more compassionate. I think we should pray for these women. I think we should support them in any way that we can. And I do not believe that the right support is to just give them IVF and encourage them to treat human life as if it is a product or a commodity. So that's that. If you guys have any questions about IVF, maybe you disagree with me. That's fine. That's okay if you disagree with me. You're wrong. Just kidding. No, but if you disagree with me, I would love to hear more. Tell me why. But I really believe that this fertility crisis in the US is not going to be solved by processes like IVF and surrogacy. It's going to be solved by better health and improving our mental and physical well-being. Hope you guys have a wonderful evening, day, week. It's hot in here. It's getting hot. Maybe I just got so riled up with talking about IVF. I want you to have babies, ladies. Having babies is great. It's really warm in here now. Next week, what are we going to talk about? There are a lot of stories. I kind of want to talk about that UGA student that got killed by the illegal migrant, but I don't know. It's so depressing. There's a lot of stuff coming up. There is a huge controversy over this content creator model, Nara Smith, who's married. I guess she's Mormon now. She's married to that Mormon model, Lucky Blue Smith. That's his name, Lucky Blue Smith or something like that. And a lot of people are talking about how she's, her manifestation of the trad wife is like representative of how trad wives are fascist and it's rooted in white privilege. Anyway, I might cover that. I don't know if there's anything else that you guys want to see. I feel like there's a lot to cover lately. All right, I'm out of here. Have a great one. Thanks, everybody. Bye.